At my gallery opening, my mother-in-law stormed in with a replacement wife, screaming, "It's finger painting! A child could do it." That's when the collector announced she'd paid $200,000 for my finger painting. The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara's face went from smug satisfaction to complete shock in about 3 seconds. The cardiac surgeon she'd brought as my replacement, Dr. Helen Martinez, according to the hasty introductions, looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. My husband James stood behind his mother like a guilty child, which honestly wasn't far from the truth. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. For 7 years, I'd let this woman convince me that my art was worthless, that I was wasting James's money on a foolish hobby. But standing there, watching her realize she'd just publicly humiliated herself in front of some of the most powerful people in the New York art world, I understood something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just about defending my work anymore. This was about completely dismantling the narrative Barbara had spent years constructing about me, using every advantage I'd quietly built while she thought I was playing with paint. The thing is, Barbara never bothered to understand what she was attacking. She saw me working in my studio and assumed I was having an expensive midlife crisis. What she didn't realize was that I'd spent the last 3 years positioning myself strategically, both professionally and legally, for exactly this kind of confrontation. My background in corporate strategy didn't disappear when I became an artist. I'm a former McKinsey consultant who specialized in hostile takeover defense strategies. When I decided to pursue art full-time, I didn't abandon that skill set. I applied it. Every decision I made was calculated, documented, and designed to create multiple layers of protection. The gallery space we were standing in, I owned it outright. Not rented, not mortgaged. Purchased with cash from my grandmother's Apple stock inheritance that Barbara had always dismissed as worthless. That secretary's pension had actually grown into a $3 million portfolio by the time Grandma passed. Barbara never knew because she never asked the right questions. I'd spent 18 months documenting every interaction with Barbara, creating detailed logs with timestamps of her interference in our marriage, the therapy sessions she insisted on attending, the financial advisors she brought to dinner to explain why art was a bad investment, the career counselors she hired to help me find a real job. Every boundary violation, every manipulation tactic, every attempt to control my choices was carefully recorded in a spreadsheet that my attorney assured me would be admissible in court. More importantly, I'd spent 2 years building relationships with Marcus Wellington, one of the most connected gallerists in Manhattan. He didn't just represent me out of kindness. My work was genuinely exceptional, and I had the sales history to prove it. Over the past year, I'd sold pieces to private collectors for amounts ranging from $15,000 to $85,000. Tonight's opening wasn't a vanity project. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated career launch with backing from serious collectors who'd been following my work for months. The prenup James and I signed was another strategic decision. Barbara thought she was protecting her son's assets from a gold-digging artist. What she actually did was give me ironclad protection against James's gambling debts, which I'd discovered 18 months ago but kept quiet about. Every bet he placed, every lie he told about working late while he was actually at the casino, every time he used my credit cards for cash advances, I documented all of it. When I realized James was stealing from me to fund his gambling addiction, I didn't confront him directly. Instead, I hired forensic accountant Rebecca Chen to trace every transaction. The investigation cost me $8,900, but it was worth every penny. Rebecca's report showed that James had stolen $127,000 from our joint accounts over 18 months, using elaborate schemes to hide the withdrawals. I also hired private investigator David Kim to document James's activities. For $12,000, David provided me with casino security footage, credit card transaction records, and photographs of James meeting with loan sharks. The evidence was overwhelming and legally bulletproof. My attorney, Jennifer Walsh, explained that in New York State, documented gambling addiction combined with financial fraud would give me grounds for divorce with asset forfeiture. The prenup I'd insisted on included a clause that if James accumulated gambling debts exceeding $50,000, he would forfeit all claims to marital property. We'd crossed that threshold months ago. Tonight wasn't supposed to be a confrontation, it was supposed to be my triumph. But Barbara's decision to stage an intervention at my gallery opening gave me something even better. A public platform to destroy her credibility while demonstrating my success to everyone who mattered in the art world. Now I had to execute the next phase of my strategy. The room was still buzzing with shock over the $200,000 sale announcement, but I could see Barbara preparing to rally. She'd built her entire identity around being the sophisticated matriarch who knew better than everyone else. Having that challenged publicly would activate every defense mechanism she had. I pulled out my phone and opened the sales tracking app my assistant had been updating throughout the evening. The numbers were even better than I'd expected. Actually, I said, making sure my voice carried across the room, that $200,000 piece is just one of tonight's sales. Marcus, what's our current total? Marcus stepped forward with a smile that could cut glass. He'd been waiting for this moment as much as I had. As of 5 minutes ago, we're at $1.3 million in confirmed sales. The Museum Acquisitions Committee from SF MoMI just confirmed their purchase of 3 pieces from the Emergence series for $450,000. The color drained from Barbara's face. That's impossible. You're lying to make me look foolish. I never lie about money, Barbara. I turned my phone screen toward the crowd, showing the real-time sales dashboard that tracked each transaction. Unlike some people in this room, I've built my reputation on accurate financial reporting. James shifted uncomfortably. He knew exactly what I was referring to. Speaking of financial accuracy, I continued, Dr. Martinez, before you accept Barbara's generous offer to replace me, you should know that James currently owes approximately $300,000 to various creditors. The trust fund payment stopped 6 months ago when the administrators discovered some interesting discrepancies. Diana, stop. James stepped forward, but his voice lacked any real authority. Stop what, darling? Telling the truth? I smiled at Helen, who was clutching her briefcase like a life preserver. I have the credit card statements right here on my phone. Cash advances at Atlantic City totaling $47,000. Second mortgages on property Barbara co-signed for. That's another $89,000. Personal loans with creative collateral arrangements, $164,000 more. Would you like me to be more specific about the interest rates? The room was dead silent now. The Times critic was taking notes furiously. The collectors were recording on their phones. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a public financial disclosure that would follow Barbara and James forever. You're making this up to embarrass us. Patricia, James's sister, finally spoke up. She'd been lurking behind Barbara like a backup singer waiting for her moment. Am I? I walked over to the bar area where I'd set up my laptop earlier, anticipating this moment. I brought some documents tonight, thinking James might finally be ready to have an honest conversation about our finances. Would you like to see the forensic accounting report? The presentation I'd prepared was devastating. 3 years of detailed financial analysis showing exactly how James had been systematically stealing from me to fund his gambling addiction. Bank statements, credit card records, casino security footage, loan documents, everything professionally organized and legally admissible. This first slide shows James's gambling losses by month, I explained to the captivated audience. Notice the escalation pattern. January 2023, $3,200. February, $5,800. By December, he was losing $18,000 per month. The total for last year alone was $127,000. This is a violation of privacy, Barbara sputtered. You can't share private financial information in public. Actually, I can share my own financial information however I choose, and since James used my credit cards and forged my signature on several loan applications, this is very much my information to share. I clicked to the next slide. This spreadsheet shows every fraudulent transaction over the past 18 months. The total is $127,000, which automatically triggers the asset forfeiture clause in our prenup. Dr. Martinez had backed toward the exit during this presentation, clearly realizing she'd been brought into something way beyond a simple marital intervention. "I think I should go," she said quietly. "Please don't leave yet, doctor," I called out. "Barbara went to significant trouble to recruit you. She told you I was mentally unstable, didn't she? That I needed help with my art obsession?" Helen nodded reluctantly. Did she mention that my art obsession generated $1 million in sales tonight, or that I'm representing the United States at the Venice Biennale next year? I gestured toward Marcus, who nodded confirmation, because those seem like relevant details when evaluating someone's mental stability. The Venice announcement was the final blow. Even Barbara understood what that meant. The Venice Biennale is the Olympics of contemporary art. It's not something you achieve through delusion or hobby-level talent. Let me also mention, I continued, that Dr. Martinez would be inheriting James's debt obligations. In New York, spouses are liable for gambling debts incurred during marriage. So that $300,000 I mentioned, that becomes her problem the moment she says, "I do." Helen's eyes widened. She took several steps toward the door. "So let me summarize tonight's events," I announced to the room, which now included several art journalists who'd been drawn in by the commotion. My mother-in-law staged an intervention at my gallery opening to replace me with a cardiac surgeon, not knowing that my finger painting hobby just generated over $1 million in sales and earned me representation at the most prestigious art exhibition in the world. Meanwhile, my husband has been stealing from me to fund a gambling addiction that's put us $300,000 in debt to some very unfriendly people. I paused for effect, making eye contact with Barbara. Did I miss anything important? "The video evidence," Marcus said helpfully. "Should we mention the security footage of James breaking into Diana's studio last month?" James went completely white. You weren't stealing paintings to sell for gambling money?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed a clear video of James loading my work into his car on March 15th. Because the timestamp and GPS data suggest otherwise. Diana chose not to press charges for family loyalty, but that can always change. The room erupted in murmurs. This had gone from family drama to criminal behavior acknowledgement in front of witnesses. The paintings he took were worth $67,000 retail, I added. He sold them to a fence in Queens for $12,000. I have the receipts. Barbara made one final attempt to regain control. "Even if all of this is true, you're still throwing away a good marriage for selfish artistic pursuits." "No, Barbara. I'm choosing financial security and personal fulfillment over subsidizing a gambling addict while his mother psychologically abuses me." I looked around the gallery at my work covering the walls, each piece marked with a red dot indicating a sale. And I'm choosing to build something meaningful instead of pretending James's problems are my responsibility to solve. "Dr. Martinez," I addressed Helen directly, "I'm curious about your financial situation. Are you prepared to take on $300,000 in gambling debts? Because that's what you're signing up for. Also, James's bookie has been known to use physical persuasion when payments are late. I have photographs of the bruises if you'd like to see them." Helen was already at the door. "I need to leave. This is not what I was told. Barbara, don't contact me again." "Wait," Barbara called after her, but Helen was gone. The consequences of this confrontation started cascading immediately. Within hours, video clips from the gallery opening were circulating on social media. Barbara's finger painting comment played on repeat across art Instagram, always followed by the $200,000 sale announcement. By morning, she was being mocked in art memes and Twitter threads about people who don't understand what they're criticizing. More importantly, the public exposure of James's gambling problems triggered serious financial consequences. The bank that held the second mortgage Barbara had co-signed called in the loan immediately after seeing the news coverage. The loan balance was $89,000, due in full within 30 days. Barbara's financial advisor called her at 7 a.m. the next morning. Her investment portfolio had been used as collateral for several of James's loans. She was personally liable for $156,000 in gambling debts she didn't know existed. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. With documented gambling addiction, financial fraud, and theft, James had no negotiating position. My attorney, Jennifer Walsh, filed the papers on Monday morning. The prenup I'd insisted on meant James forfeited any claim to marital assets. He also faced potential criminal charges for the studio break-in and credit card fraud. "The evidence is overwhelming," Jennifer explained during our Tuesday meeting. "The forensic accounting report, the video footage, the documented theft. James will be lucky to avoid jail time. His only option is to plead guilty and hope for probation." Dr. Martinez sent Barbara a formal letter declining any further contact and threatening legal action if she was dragged into any more family interventions. She also filed a complaint with the medical board about being misled into participating in what amounted to harassment. 3 months later, my career had reached heights I couldn't have imagined during those dark years when Barbara was convincing me I was wasting my life. The Venice Biennale selection led to museum acquisitions from MoMA, the Whitney, and the Guggenheim. International gallery representation followed, with exhibitions scheduled in London, Paris, and Tokyo. The financial independence I'd built gave me the freedom to create without compromise. My net worth had grown from the $3 million inheritance to over $8 million through strategic art sales and investments. I bought a second studio space in Brooklyn and hired 2 assistants to help manage the demand for my work. James ended up in court-mandated rehab after pleading guilty to theft and fraud charges. He received 2 years probation and was required to pay restitution of $127,000, money he didn't have. His gambling addiction counselor reported that he was making progress, but the financial damage was permanent. Barbara lost not just the Southampton house, but most of her social standing when the financial details became public. Her country club friends couldn't overlook the scale of deception she'd enabled. She had to sell her Manhattan apartment to cover James's debts and move to a modest rental in Queens. Patricia, James's sister, cut contact with both her mother and brother after learning about the extent of the financial fraud. She told mutual friends that she couldn't trust people who'd hidden such serious problems while asking her for loans. The gallery opening intervention became a cautionary tale in art world circles about what happens when people underestimate artists as business people. Marcus Wellington used it as a case study in his gallery management seminars, showing how proper documentation and strategic thinking can turn a crisis into a career-defining moment. 6 months after the opening, I received a letter from James. He was living in a halfway house, working as a dishwasher, and attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice a week. He apologized for the theft and acknowledged that his mother's interference had been destructive to our marriage. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, just wanted me to know he understood what he'd lost. Barbara never apologized. According to mutual acquaintances, she maintained that I had overreacted and destroyed the family over money. She found a job as a receptionist at a medical office, a significant come down from her previous life of leisure. Her attempts to maintain her social connections failed as word spread about her role in enabling James's addiction. Dr. Martinez, meanwhile, became an unexpected ally. She reached out through Marcus to apologize for her unwitting participation in Barbara's scheme. As a successful professional woman herself, she understood the challenges of dealing with manipulative family members. She even attended my next gallery opening and purchased a piece for her private collection. Looking back, that night was the culmination of years of careful preparation, disguised as patient endurance. While Barbara thought she was slowly wearing down my confidence, I was actually building a fortress of legal, financial, and professional protection that made her attacks increasingly irrelevant. The strategic documentation I'd maintained proved invaluable. Every recorded conversation, every financial transaction, every instance of interference became evidence in my favor. My attorney estimated that the comprehensive paper trail saved me at least $200,000 in legal fees and ensured a swift resolution. The best part wasn't just winning the confrontation. It was discovering that my art, my vision, and my strategic thinking were all valuable in ways Barbara could never understand or undermine. Her intervention didn't destroy my hobby, it launched my empire. The gallery opening that was supposed to be my professional debut became something much more significant, a public demonstration that underestimating someone's capabilities can have devastating consequences. Barbara learned that lesson the hard way, and the art world took notice. Today, my work sells for 6 figures regularly. The Venice Biennale representation led to a retrospective at the Whitney Museum. I've been featured on the cover of Art News and profiled in the New York Times. The finger-painting comment that was meant to humiliate me became the title of my most successful series. Barbara's attempt to replace me with a more suitable wife backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying my confidence, she gave me a platform to showcase my success and expose the truth about her son's problems. The cardiac surgeon she recruited as my replacement wanted nothing to do with the chaos she'd created. The financial impact on Barbara was severe and permanent. Between the gambling debts she'd co-signed for, the legal fees, and the loss of her properties, she lost approximately $400,000. James's addiction cost her not just money, but her entire lifestyle and social standing. Meanwhile, my strategic approach to the crisis paid dividends far beyond what I'd initially calculated. The publicity from the gallery opening intervention, while initially embarrassing, ultimately elevated my profile in the art world. Collectors who might never have heard of me were suddenly interested in my work. The lesson here is that documentation and preparation are more powerful than emotional reactions. While Barbara was focused on controlling and manipulating, I was building evidence and strategic advantages. When the confrontation finally came, I was ready with facts, figures, and legal protection. The intervention was over. My emergence had just begun. And Barbara's attempt to destroy my hobby had instead launched one of the most successful art careers of my generation.